Outdoors with Ted Ellenbecker, the freshwater angler's #1 source for information. Interesting, informative, at times controversial, but always delivering information that can help make your next outing the best. Your host for today's show, Ted Ellenbecker.
Hey, I'm Ted Ellenbecker and I'm really happy you're with me today. This is a pretty neat video. We're going to be talking about locating fish, any fish on any water. It doesn't matter what species you want to fish for. It doesn't matter if you're going to fish a river, a lake, a stream, a pond, stock dam. It doesn't make any difference. There is a strategy. It's called the theory of three. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It works. It's going to put you on high percentage water consistently on your body of water. Now this isn't a miracle lure, it's not a magic wand. You need to do a few things. You need to have an understanding of the species that you want to fish for, obviously. You want to have a knowledge of the body of water and what elements are available on that body of water. And we're going to talk about elements in detail here, okay? You also have to know, what do you want out of the fishing trip? Now this is to make it a successful trip, obviously. Do you want a trophy fish? Do you want a few fryers? Do you want to just go sit in the sun and enjoy a nice afternoon? Either one of those answers are all okay. But you have to pick a body of water that can do that for you to start with. You need to decide on the species you want to fish for, and you want to decide on a body of water that can supply that type of a fish. Okay? The guys that are showing pictures of catching big fish all the time, obviously they're fishing bodies of water that have that fish to catch. Just a thought. You'd be surprised how many people don't pay attention to that. Before we get into the structure end of this, I want to ask you a couple of questions though. Just something to think about. Food for thought, right? And if you fish very often, you've done this. Let's say you're out in your boat, you're fishing, spent the day, you really thought you had them knocked dead, right? You're going to do it. And it didn't work. The fish just had lockjaw. You get back to your car, you look at your partner, you go, what if? What if we had? What if we did? What if we went? Wow, you know, I used to do that a lot in the past. I'm glad I don't anymore because I always felt like I did something wrong. Well, you can't always catch fish, but you can do it right all the time if you choose to. Which that's really a lot of satisfaction just knowing that, believe it or not. Plus, it ups your odds on high percentage water. It also ups your odds on finding some of the bigger fish in the body of water that you fish for. Now another scenario kind of like this, you're out in the boat, fish aren't biting. What do? You look at your partner and you go, now what? You got any ideas? What are we going to do? You've already tried your spots, you know, and most people at this point really don't know what to do. If you use this strategy and you follow through with it, you will know what to do if that happens. I'll guarantee that. You'll know. And then the next one, you know, what do you do to prepare yourself for this fishing trip? Now, I'm not talking about tackle, because we all play with our tackle box. I'm pretty sure of that. I do all the time. I check all my little trinkets, make sure I got everything I want, including candy bars, you know. But what do you do to prepare yourself? You see, because you are the most important part of your fishing trip. You make the decisions. You drive the boat, you drive the car, you cast the rod, you pick the bait. You are in charge of everything. So you need information, good information, that allows you to make good decisions on the body of water. Now, what do I mean by preparing yourself? Well, obviously, we already talked about, you know, what kind of fish do you want to catch? You want to catch walleyes, muskies, northerns, crappie, perch, channel cats, flatheads? What do you want? You need to decide that. Now, multi-species, that's cool. Even if that's the case, though, you need to pick a lake, a river, a body of water that can supply that for you. Otherwise, right off the bat, you're going to lose. If you want a trophy, you need to get a body of water that can do that for you. How do you do this? Well, your personal experience, hopefully, will help you. Hopefully you have some experience. But what I do, when I'm going to go fishing Saturday or Sunday, I'll start on Wednesday, and I'll make some phone calls. I'll call a game fish and parks department. How's fishing? Believe it or not, they're pretty good about telling you what's going on. They may not know, but if they don't, they'll tell you that too. I talk to bait shops. I want to get their local fishing report from the area I'm fishing. Now, I know some of you say, well, bait shops, they aren't going to tell you. Bait shops are going to tell you. They're in the business to have you come back and buy more bait, more equipment, more lures, everything. If a bait shop would give you information that wasn't quite right, it's only because that's what they were told. Most of the information they get is going to be from anglers that come back into the bait shop and tell them what's going on. Well, some of that's going to be the truth, and maybe some of it's going to be exaggerated. Who knows? But they will tell you the truth if they can. What I do with bait shops is I try to call 2 or 3 within the area that I'm going to fish. And if a couple of those match up, they tell me the same lake, they give me some of the same information, I'm going to pretty much trust it. I'm going to talk to some of my friends, and I'm also just going to go on my own knowledge about this time of year, this body of water, all of that. But the more information you get, the better off you're going to be about making decisions. You can eliminate a tremendous amount of bad water if you have the right information before you ever leave home. Okay? You're going to want to look on some of your maps, like your electronic maps, your paper maps for this body of water. Where's your access areas? If you're fishing from shore, you're going to want to know a couple of good access areas. You're going to want to know what direction the wind has been. You can get this off your weather service the last couple of days, because, rule of law, the wind coming into a shore will produce some fish. The quiet side of the lake, not so much. But something you have to understand about wind: it doesn't produce fish in a day. I always say fish the weather from 2 or 3 days ago. If you've had 2 days out of the north, 2 days ago, today's out of the south, but 2 days ago for a day and a half you had a hard north wind, I'm going to be looking at the south shore, whether today's blowing out of the south or not, because it takes a couple days for those fish to move. The wind can only move the plankton and the shrimp and everything so fast, so the bait fish only go over it so fast, and the big fish don't get there either for a day or two. So always fish the weather a couple days prior, okay? Rather than just the morning you're going. That's just kind of something to go by. Now, you are the most important part of this. We've already kind of talked about that. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. You need to do some homework prior to going. You need to understand the fish. You need to know what elements are available in that body of water. Now, here's where we're going to start getting into structure and understanding the water, and how to put together some areas that will consistently concentrate and hold fish. And there's a reason for this, okay? It's not just hearsay. To start with, you need to break your body of water down and find out what elements are in that body of water that the species of fish you're fishing for are going to relate to. Pretty simple. Now, here's where you do have an advantage. Every species has its preferences in forage, it has its preferences for structure, it has its preferences for the elements that it uses, because each element does something else, okay? And it gives them what they want. So you need to know that, or the more you know that, the better off you're going to be. Sometimes you're fortunate, you have a body of water where there's only so many elements, so the fish don't have a lot of choice, makes it a lot easier. But you still got to follow these rules if you want to get into consistently some concentrated fish, and maybe even the biggest fish in the body of water. So I've mentioned elements. What are elements? Well, an element, and if you look it up in the dictionary, an element is a piece or a part of something. It's used to build something. Okay, so when we're talking about the body of water we fish, you have elements in that body of water. Now they will change from body of water to body of water, obviously, they will. And possibly some of the elements will change day to day, even hour to hour. And we'll get into that. An element is a piece of that lake. Okay, a real simple example would be some lakes have docks. Some lakes don't have docks. Okay, so for one lake, docks are elements. For the other lake, docks are not elements. Some lakes have bulrushes, some lakes do not. Some lakes have rock shorelines, some don't. Right? Some have points, some don't. Those are all elements for that lake for that day. This is what you're looking for. Now, there are elements that don't appear like that, and you need to consider them. Well, you don't have to, but the more of this that you do, the tighter you draw the knot. Okay? And I look at it like this. If I run a 100-yard dash in 10 flat, which I never have, but if I did, I'd be very excited, and I'd think I'd win the race, right? But if the guy next to me runs a 9.9, he beat me, just like that. For just a tenth of a second, he just beat me. So I try to do as much of this as I can, because I feel like it gives me that extra little what if. Maybe I'll put that one more fish in my boat, give me that one more bite for the day. Okay? So, elements can be a lot of things. You need to find high-powered elements. We're going to get into this. There are certain types of elements. There's 4 types of elements, actually. There are inherent elements on every body of water. Every body of water has these. This is the water, the air, and the ground, right? Every water has that. And they are huge elements. You know, obviously, you need them to make the water. But they don't do you any good until another element affects them. Real simple. Wind, or I should say the air. The air does not affect your fishing until there's either no wind or temperature changes or light or darkness. Correct? Water, the water does not affect the position of the fish unless there's temperature changes, waves, right? Clear water, dirty water, murky water. See? The ground, or terra firma if you would prefer, doesn't actually position fish unless there's changes. Are there points? Are there old roadbeds? Are there channels? Are there humps? Are there holes? These are all elements. I will add rocky shorelines into that. So all these elements can make up the bodies of water, okay? Real simple, real simple. All you're doing is cataloging which ones will affect the species you're chasing. There's 4 types of elements in a body of water. We're going to cover them. Now we're going to streamline this a little bit. First off, the inherent elements. Second, you have the common element, and that is all the things I just mentioned and more. Everything can be an element, even old rusty cars, if it's present in that body of water. Okay? But they don't do you as an angler a lot of good until they change. And we'll talk about that. The second one is a cluster element. A cluster element is just simply that. It's a whole bunch of something. It covers a lot of ground. This could be standing timber in a bay. This could be a bay that's full of bulrushes. This could be a 2-mile strip of riprap. This could be an old roadbed goes across the lake. It's a big something. Okay, that's a cluster element. Now, cluster elements are pretty cool. They do have the power, and we will talk more about power. They do have the power to hold some fish because they're big. They have a lot of mass, a lot of size. But there's a problem with cluster elements. The fish are usually scattered unless you connect a second element to it. And that produces a staging structure where these fish will stage up. Where, let's just say, where the 30-foot cottonwood falls into the old river channel. Now you've got a crossover point, you have connection. By themselves, they would hold some fish, maybe not a lot, and they'd be scattered. With this connection, you have a gathering point. a staging structure. Okay? You want to connect 3 of those, by the way. The next one is a high percentage element. Now this is what you're looking for. A high percentage element can be anything, just like we've been talking about. It's an element. But it has 2 things that it has to have to be your best friend. A high percentage element has size and mass. That's how it gains power. It also gains power by its connection or relationship to another high-powered element. They feed off of each other. They give each other more power, more ability to collect, concentrate, and hold fish. Understood? Pretty easy. It's pretty easy. It's just common sense. But it's amazing how many people don't think about it. It's amazing that people haven't told you about this before, to be honest about it. So now we've talked about structure, and I want to back up just a touch here. What is structure? We've decided what elements are, and we've discussed them, and they build a structure. But this might be a little confusing to some people because there's a couple of definitions of structure that have been put out in the past and are still used today that quite honestly I argue with, just because even if you just check a dictionary on the word structure, they don't fit. They just don't fit. And I believe that information needs to be accurate, number one, and it needs to serve a purpose to do you any good. So that's what we're doing here today. All right? So a structure, well, here. So what are the old definitions? Just because, I don't know. Some people don't know them. One of the definitions was done in like the 1950s. The freshwater angler said, if it's on the bottom, connected to the bottom of the body water, it's structure. Period. Saltwater angler came by about 10 years later and said, if it's a change in the bottom, no mention of size, no mention of anything else, just a change, it's structure. Well, okay, first off, let me tell you, the definition of structure is that it's the relationship of elements to form or build something. That's what it is. I can give you a real easy example. Picture a house. A house has windows. A house has doors. A house has walls. It has basements. It has different rooms, and on and on and on. A roof. Okay? Now, if you look at that and you go, is that a structure? You'd say, yeah, of course that's a structure. Anybody would, because it is. Now, if you took it apart and you laid the window out in a field, and you said, is that a structure? Well, no, obviously it is not a structure. It's a window. And that's what we're going to get into right here. Take a look at these 2 pictures, if you would, please. I've got a rock here to start with, and this is not a trick question or anything else. It's a rock. But according to those 2 definitions, if this is laying on the bottom of the water, it's a structure. First off, it doesn't make sense. Second off, it does you no good. Third off, no anglers use that. I'm going to say, what? It's a structure? They go, what? What is it? It's a rock. That's what it is. Okay? So, the next picture we got here, this is a stick. Same kind of thing. If this was laying on the bottom, according to previous definitions, this would be a structure. Well, obviously it's not. It is a stick. A structure is the combination of elements like this that form something, that form an object. Now, there's no restrictions on structures when it comes to size, okay, or location, or shape. They can be anything. You can have, like, people that pull plugs. They're going, well, I can't fish structure. I pull plugs. Well, you're wrong. You can have 2 miles of river channel, and they butt up on both ends with nice, beautiful points and some old rocks and trees. That's your structure for 2 miles. You just don't know what element the fish are on. Are they on the points or are they on the old channel? See, but they are connected, and the fish will move back and forth on that. That is your structure. That can be 10 feet long or it could be 2 miles long. It doesn't make any difference. The fish will still use it. And most of you know that. So my point is to find a structure that you want to find. It should have 3 elements in it that your species of fish will use on that body of water. And those 3 elements should all carry their own power, their own capability of concentrating and holding fish. If you can get that, you have a structure that will consistently hold fish and concentrate fish. Why? Real simple. If you just had a tree branch or you had a log laying out there, biologically that log only supplies so many things to a fish. Now if you had the log laying over a channel, now you have changed it up. Now you've got a vertical ledge, you've got possibly some cover, you've got maybe some shade, you've got a depth change, you've got the log. See what I mean? And every time you add a powerful element, you add things that that structure does for the fish. So it will obviously hold fish more often than not. Now, one thing to structure also, if you don't catch the fish in the morning, don't freak out. Come back in the afternoon, 3 or 4 hours later, and try the structure again. They might have not have been there. They might not have been biting. You can't change that, but there will be fish there. I'm going to give you a little bit of a word of advice about structures also right now. One mistake that a lot of people make when they're fishing structure, they become soured on one or more elements. In other words, I have a friend that thinks deep water. No matter where we are, no matter what we're fishing, deep water. The fish are in deep water. Well, frankly, most of the time, they're not. Now, he hits an ace of spades when the fish are in deep water because that's where he is all the time. But the fish are shallow more often and mid-depth more often than they are in deep water for a lot of reasons. Where is the forage as a rule? Where does the majority of forage stay? Shallow water weed beds, points, right? Mid-depth maybe for schools. Deep water has a problem. Temperature changes, thermoclines, temperature, you know, just the whole thing. It just is not usually a solid feeding ground, except for certain situations where you have certain schooling bait fish that you're using deep water. Then, of course, some of the fish will follow them down. But you will always have some fish shallower. So, how do you pick your structures? Now you know what you got to find, right? You have to find one with the elements, one that's put together this way on a proper body of water for the species that you want to fish. If you have not found out what depth the fish are at or what end of the lake they're at, I would pick a mid-depth to start looking for structures like this. Let's just say the lake's 40 foot deep. I would probably start in that 20-foot range, maybe even 15, say 15 to 25, there we go. And I would start looking for structures there if I have no idea where the fish are. You know, as far as depth. If I don't know north-south lake, you know, east-west lake, whatever, then I'm going to look at the wind. Where would be the most likely spot? Or is there an incoming element, like a river, a tributary, that is a magnet for every species of fish there is? You can back off of those type of elements into your depth, find good structures, and you got a really good chance of finding fish. That's just the way it is. It works that way. So anyway, I would start on the mid-depth. If I don't find fish there, I'm going to personally go shallower because I believe there's always fish shallow, always active fish shallow. And then, of course, if I can't find fish, I will try deep water, sure, but I prefer not to, unless I've been told that's where the action's at. For sure, that's where your phone calls come in the first part of the week. Okay, you know, we've talked about elements, we've talked about the structure, but I want to show you what some of this looks like. Now, obviously, there are structures under the water that you will use your electronics to locate that you won't see. But for this purpose, for the purpose of the video, I'm going to be showing you pictures of structures with elements that you can see. Okay? Just so you understand, so you can get the connection, the relationship kind of thing. All right, so the first structure we got here that you can see is like a little riffle. It's kind of a low head dam. It's below the base of a bridge. You've got all kinds of elements involved here. Obviously, you have some rock. You have running water that's creating current lines. It's also creating, a dugout hole below it. You have some quiet water off to the sides, like a feeding platform. You've got a staging structure downstream, probably. This just has all kinds of presentation possibilities. Okay, there are elements here. And obviously everybody knows that something like this will hold all kinds of different fish. It does. And that's why there are elements involved that all these fish will relate to. Let's look at the next one. This is on the Missouri River, and this is a really nice structure to pay attention to. It represents a big ground covering structure. Okay? Right here closest to us, you got this rock island. The base of that island is in about 10 foot on the left side, and on the right side it drops into about 15 foot because the channel rubs right up against the base of it on this river. Behind that rock island, you've got a flat that goes anywhere from 10 foot to 4 foot. That is about half the size of a football field. A nice feeding platform for a lot of different species. And then obviously behind it you see that huge rock point. Now that is approximately 200-300 yards, maybe 400 yards past this little rock island. But the channel that comes up to the front of this little island also hits right into the nose of that big point. Okay, so you have all kinds of connected elements here. The trick is to find what element these fish are on. And right here I'm going to tell you, when you pull up to a structure like this, or a structure that has 3 high-powered elements in it, don't make the mistake that just about everybody does. Most people have a favorite element. I like bulrushes, I like rocks, I like humps, I like channels, I like whatever. They'll pull up to a structure that has that in there, and they'll make their presentation to their favorite piece. That channel or whatever. Big mistake. You just walked away from 66% of your potential bites if you don't present to the other 2 big elements. Okay? Now if you find the fish on one of the elements, fine, forget what I'm saying here. But if you are looking for fish, if you're searching for fish, if you're following the strategy, you need to present to this island. You need to present to the edge of that feeding flat. You need to present to the point, and I would present to the channel. If you don't, you're walking away from potential bites. And why would you do that? You stopped there thinking there were fish there, right? Otherwise, why'd you stop? Well, if you think there's fish there, there probably are. If you've done your homework and you know the body of water and your species and you think there's fish there, there probably are, but what element are they sitting on? See what I mean? Don't walk away. I mean, you can go ahead. Take off, spend a half hour trying to find another structure with your rocks or whatever. But you just walked away from a really nice structure that probably has some fish sitting on it somewhere. And you stopped there because you thought they were going to be there. This is, just an example of a cluster element. Like I said, the standing timber way back in the bay. This works really good. It will hold fish. It has some power because of its size. Numbers game kind of thing, lots of it. But to really fish it successfully and efficiently, you really need to add another element or 2 to this element. So you can put the fish into a staging structure and you can concentrate them and hold them. Okay? Okay, we got just a couple more structures to look at here, just so you get a really good idea of the connection, of the relationship of elements. This is an old bridge piling, an old railroad bridge. In these pilings, that water is about 15 feet deep. We have a little surface cover on this side, and if you look carefully, you can see on the outside where that little bit of white is, that's like a little current line coming around there. So if that's where the current hits, you have a channel on the front, you have some good depth with the pillars and cover in there. You have some surface clutter and some quiet water behind it, a nice little staging area. So there's all kinds of things going on here. There's a lot of elements right here that can hold the fish. It's not a huge structure, but on a small body of water, it's a very, very good structure, obviously. So let's look at a couple more. On the next one that I'm going to pull up, this is on a small river, and you've got kind of a little bit of a point outcropping, as you can see, and you've got riprap wrapped around this point, big slabs of concrete, and they actually come down into the water downstream just a little ways, and there's some quiet water right out in front of this riprap. But right above the riprap, this river's coming down and hitting right off the nose of this riprap. So there's a channel out there, there's a current line. So you have a channel, you have a current line, you have riprap, you have some quiet holding water. This is a very small structure, but it contains some really nice elements. Okay, this is the relationship, the connecting points on that body of water. I'm going to give you one more little thought about structures and elements, and then we're going to probably let you go and give it a try. You want to look at big, old elements when you're putting your structures together, if you can, okay? And there's a reason for this. It's important. Big obviously gives them the power. The old puts the icing on the cake. Let me give you an example about what I'm talking about. Say you take a log jam or a tree laying in the water. It's brand new. Leaves are still on it, and it just fell over. That tree is not part of the water yet. It's a tree. And I'm not going to say something won't come around and hang out on it, but when that tree has been there for a couple years, all of a sudden the water has inherited it. Okay? If it's in a river, you have cutouts going under that tree, you have a channel going around the end, you have connection to the bank. The bark has come off it, you got bugs living there, you got freshwater shrimp living there, you have bait fish living there, you have turtles living there. This is part of the water now. And any element is going to be like that. If it's old, it'll have algae growing on it, the fish will have used it as a home. Okay? So the older the element, the better. The older the structure, the better.
From everyone here at Outdoors with Ted Ellenbecker, thank you for joining us today. Safe travels, and may your next outing be the best.